Today I'm going to show you the family tree of Danish monarchs. The Kingdom of Denmark has been in existence since the year 936, and thus the Danish monarchy is considered to be the oldest monarchy still in existence in Europe. As usual, I'll be using my European royal family tree chart, which is available as a poster from my website usefulcharts.com. However, since not all the monarchs of Denmark are covered on the chart, I'll be using some bonus material as well. On this chart, the Nordic countries are shown in light blue. Every monarch from Christian I onwards is shown, but prior to that we only have the first 3 monarchs of Denmark shown here. So here's what we're going to do. First of all, I'm going to clear some space, leaving only the relevant parts. Then I'm going to add the missing Danish monarchs, so we can make a connection between these 3 and Christian I. Finally, I'm going to add some legendary Viking characters up here, so that we can discuss them as well, and how they might connect to the historical Danish monarchs. So let's start with the legendary characters. And just to be clear, everything shown here in the gray is not what we call historical. Much of it is based solely on Norse legends, and therefore, although there could be some historical truth to it, the details are very uncertain. Only the sections shown in blue are what we would call real history. I've used photos from the TV show Vikings. But again, please remember that the show is actually fictional and based on legends, not history. And in many cases, the show even messes with the actual Norse legends in order to make the story work better for television. The main character on that show is Ragnar Lodbrok. He's based on one of the most famous legendary Vikings of all time. In reality, the legends about him are probably based on the lives of several different real people, whose names have since been lost to history, and of course with several mythical and exaggerated elements worked in. On the show, Ragnar has a brother named Rollo. In reality, Rollo was not the brother of Ragnar, but was in fact a historical figure. He's important because he attacked Normandy in France and settled there. He's the earliest known ancestor of William the Conqueror, who famously led the Norman invasion of England in 1066. Another Viking that appears on the TV show is Harald Finehair, who in Norse legends is also called Harald Fairhair. He's a semi-historical figure who became the first king of Norway. As far as I know, Rurik doesn't appear in the show, but I included him because he's another famous Viking from around the same time period. He went on to settle in Russia and is the progenitor of the Rurikid dynasty, which produced the first Tsar of Russia, Ivan the Terrible. The problem with legends is that different copies of a legend often disagree with each other. In some Norse legends, all 5 of these individuals are the sons of Ragnar and his wife Aslog. But on the TV show, Bjorn Ironside is the son of Lagertha instead. Now, Bjorn Ironside, like Ragnar, is more of a legendary rather than a historical figure. But he's important because some legends list him as the ancestor of Eric the Victorious, the first historically verifiable king of Sweden. Ubba, on the other hand, was an actual historical person. He led a group of Vikings known as the Great Heathen Army, which attacked England in the 860s and 870s. His brother, Ivar the Boneless, was historical as well, and was also a leader of the Great Army. Hvitserk may have been the same person as Halfdan Ragnarsson, another supposed son of Ragnar who was part of the Great Army. But the person that's most important to this video is Sigurd Snake in the Eye. He and his son Harthacnut, or Canute I, were semi-historical kings of Denmark, and according to some sources, were the ancestors of Gorm the Old. With Gorm the Old, we officially switch from legend to history. As I mentioned earlier, the Kingdom of Denmark is officially dated to the year 936, the start of Gorm's reign, and therefore the first ruling dynasty of Denmark is known as the House of Gorm. And please note that I'll be using the English pronunciations for these names as opposed to the Danish throughout. The House of Gorm is important because it came to rule not only Denmark, but England as well. This occurred during the reign of Sven Forkbeard. He had overthrown his father, Harold Bluetooth, and came to rule much of Norway as well. He invaded England several times and was finally successful in 1014. He was proclaimed King of England, but then died about a month later. What happened next is this. Sven's oldest son, Harold II, became King of Denmark, and Canute II was chosen to be King of England. The English initially forced Canute to retreat back to Denmark, but he returned 2 years later and reconquered England, officially becoming the king in 1016. But his brother died in 1018, so from 1018 to 1035, Canute was king of both Denmark and of England, as well as much of Norway and Sweden. The territory he ruled is sometimes called the North Sea Empire, but because it fell apart after his death, the name isn't really well known. However, he himself is remembered as Canute the Great. When he died, his eldest son, Harthacnut, or Canute III, became king of Denmark, and his younger son, Harold Harefoot, became king of England. But when the younger son died, Canute III became king of both Denmark and England. By the time Canute III died, there were no living male line descendants from the House of Gorm. The throne of Denmark therefore passed to the King of Norway for a brief period, before passing to a grandson of Sven Forkbeard through a daughter named Estrid. This created a new house, the House of Estridsson. And meanwhile in England, power went back to the Anglo-Saxon kings for a few decades before the arrival of William the Conqueror. The kings of Denmark prior to the House of Estridsson are often referred to as being Viking kings. However, after Sven II, the term Viking is no longer used, as Denmark had become a Christian nation. Sven II had several illegitimate sons by different women, and 5 of them became king after him. This was a period of instability, and things eventually led to civil war. Eric II, son of Eric I, took control away from the last of Sven's sons to rule. Eric II was then followed by his nephew, Eric III. But Eric III ended up abdicating. The throne was then fought over between these 3 individuals, Sven III, Canute V, and Valdemar I. Valdemar emerged victorious and went on to become Valdemar the Great. He was followed by his sons Canute VI and Valdemar II. Valdemar had a son via his first wife who reigned as a co-monarch, but he outlived that son. 3 of his sons from his second wife, a princess from Portugal, became king after him. Then the line continues through Christopher I and his son Eric V. Eric V was assassinated by a group of individuals who crept up on him while he was sleeping and stabbed him 56 times. To this day, it is not known who led this conspiracy, but it was likely a group of unhappy nobles. Things in Denmark went downhill from there. During the reigns of Eric VI and his brother Christopher II, the Danish monarchy slowly descended into bankruptcy due to lavish spending and famine. Much of the land in Denmark was mortgaged to German nobles, and for a brief period, the Kingdom of Denmark even ceased to exist. But the situation was reversed by Valdemar IV, who restored and rebuilt the kingdom. However, Valdemar IV's only son died before him, so after Valdemar died, the throne went to his grandson. One of Valdemar IV's daughters had married the king of Norway, so this individual here, Olaf II, became king of Denmark when Valdemar IV died, And then after his father died, he also became King of Norway. For the next 430 years or so after this, Denmark and Norway would share a monarch. But Olaf II died at age 16. His mother had been running things as regent anyway, so when Olaf II died, she became the first reigning queen of Denmark and Norway. And in 1389, she also became Queen of Sweden. This was the beginning of the Kalmar Union, a time in which all three of these countries shared a monarch. Part of the agreement was that this individual, the grandson of Margaret's sister, would become king of all three countries. He was crowned earlier than this, when he was a young child, but Margaret retained control until her death in 1417. King Eric, known as King Eric of Pomerania, reigned until 1442. By this point, he had been deposed in all three countries and replaced by his nephew, Christopher of Bavaria. But Christopher died unexpectedly, and Christian I was elected king. First by Denmark only, but eventually he became king of Norway and Sweden as well. With Christian I, we get the start of a new house, the House of Oldenburg, a house that has lasted until the present day. Christian I was remotely connected to the House of Estridsson through his mother. You can see here that he was a descendant of Eric V. But on his father's side, he belonged to the House of Oldenburg, and this house can be traced to Elamar I, who lived around the same time as these Danish kings here. This individual is important because he is not only the earliest known male line descendant of the current Danish monarch, but also of the current Norwegian monarch and of Prince Charles, the future King of Great Britain. Therefore, Prince William, Prince Harry, and the young Prince George are all direct male line descendants of the Oldenburg line. That means if you were only to look at fathers, in other words, Prince Charles's father, and then his father's father, and then his father's father's father, and so on, you would eventually come back to this person here. And then the line would stop because we can't go any further than this. But back to Denmark. Now that we have reached Christian I, we can switch back to the European royal family tree poster. Christian I was followed by his son John, and then his grandson Christian II. You can also see here that Christian I had a daughter who married into the Scottish royal family. But after Christian II, the throne passed to his uncle Frederick I, and the Kalmar Union ended. So from here on, we get kings of Denmark and Norway only, not of Sweden. And you'll also notice that the kings start alternating between the names Christian and Frederick. But we also get some other branches of the family that I'll point out. First, we get a male line descendant from this branch that eventually becomes Emperor of Russia. All the Russian emperors after this point are officially members of the House of Holstein-Gottorp-Romanov, a junior branch of the House of Oldenburg. We also get a branch here that eventually becomes the House of Glücksburg, which later takes over from the senior branch, but we'll get to that in a moment. You'll also see several marriages into the British royal family. The wife of King James I of England and VI of Scotland was Danish, and therefore all these Stuart monarchs had some Danish blood in them. Queen Anne also married a Danish prince, but their son died young and the Stuart line ended with her. If we go back to the main line of Danish kings, you'll see that the senior line eventually dies out in the 1800s. Also, I'll note that in 1814, during the reign of Frederick VI, there was a war between Sweden and Norway that resulted in Norway being united with Sweden instead of Denmark. And you can see that the monarchs of Sweden-Norway from the House of Bernadotte on are shown over here. When the main Oldenburg line died out in Denmark, the throne passed to Christian the Ninth. He was a great-grandson of Frederick V through his mother, but he was also a direct male line descendant of the Oldenburgs through his father, via a branch that we mentioned earlier. You have to go back 6 generations to find that connection. So with King Christian the Ninth, the reigning house in the Kingdom of Denmark is now the House of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg, or for short, just Glücksburg. But remember, this is not really a new house. It's a junior branch of the House of Oldenburg that became the main branch after the senior branch died out. King Christian the Ninth is often called the father-in-law of Europe because 2 of his daughters married important European monarchs. Princess Alexandra married King Edward VII of the United Kingdom, and Princess Dagmar married Emperor Alexander III of Russia. This means that King George V and Emperor Nicholas II were cousins, and it has often been pointed out how much they look alike. While he was still King of Denmark, Christian IX's second-born son was elected King of Greece as George I. His oldest son, Frederick VIII, went on to succeed him as King of Denmark. Frederick VIII also fathered 2 kings. His second-born son became King of Norway after Norway separated from Sweden, and his first-born son, Christian X, became King of Denmark. So in both cases, the first-born son inherited the Danish throne, and the second-born son became king of another country. So for a while, the House of Glücksburg reigned in 3 different countries, in Denmark, in Greece, and in Norway. Today, it's just Denmark and Norway, because the Greek monarchy was abolished in 1973. However, the husband of Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, is a grandson of King George I of Greece, via a male-only line. And that's why originally he was titled as a Prince of Greece and Denmark. That's also why he, Prince Charles, and Prince William, etc., are all technically part of the House of Oldenburg through the Glücksburg line. It's unlikely that the British royals will ever use that name, though. The Queen has stated her wishes clearly that she would like the name Windsor to be used, regardless of whether future monarchs are male or female. If we go back to the Danish monarchs, we can see that Christian X was followed by Frederick IX, who is then followed by Queen Margrethe II, the current monarch. The name of the earlier queen, who I called Margaret I, is Margrethe in Danish, hence the number 2 after the name of the current queen. So because both the Norwegian monarchy and the Danish monarchy stem from Frederick VIII, that makes these 2 monarchs second cousins. But Queen Margrethe is actually more closely related to the King of Sweden, even though he's from a different house. That's because her mother and his father were brother and sister. So that was the history of the Danish monarchy. Hopefully in a future video, I'll be looking more closely at Norway and Sweden as well. And just a reminder, the House of Estertsen that we discussed earlier is not shown on the poster version of the chart, but all the monarchs of Denmark from Christian I onwards, as well as the first few Viking kings, are shown. Next year, I hope to make a new Part 2 version of the European royal family tree, which will focus on Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. So keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, if you'd like a copy of this chart, it is available on my website, usefulcharts.com. Thanks for watching.